Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me is Mike Kennedy, co-founder and CEO of KOALA, a company that works to make it easier for travelers to rent timeshares and help timeshare owners cover expenses for a space that they can't use. Mike, it's great to meet with you. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thanks for having me, Jill.
All right, and tell us about the timeshare industry.
Yeah, the timeshare industry is, it's been around for some time. It's been around for about 50 years. I think it really kind of hit the map when the major developers, major like hospitality brands like Hilton, Marriott, Disney, they kind of came into the space in the late 90s and really took over a lot of the development. And since then, you've seen a lot of development in places like urban destinations, things that are not necessarily associated with timeshare vacation resorts. So on the resort side, it's definitely come a long way.
And why have they been hard to sell or transfer? What are some of the challenges associated with ownership?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first issue that a lot of people face with timeshare is a perception issue. I think, as I just mentioned, the resorts themselves have kind of evolved to these beautiful resorts that I don't think people really associate with a timeshare resort. But in the perception is kind of similar in that, people are kind of feeling in a way that, they can't sell them on some levels. There's a liquidity issue, but it all stems to a natural lack of demand. And, when I was I was actually in Hilton Grand in the sales department for some time. And, they say that timeshares aren't bought, they're sold. And there's this process you have to go through to really kind of create this demand for the product. You essentially kind of sell the dream, but there's no organic demand to the product. And I think that's essentially what the fundamental problem is. And again, it all stems back to, I think, perception, right? So if you can kind of change the perception, and that perception being that people feel stuck in them, you can really, I think, grab a new class of buyers and kind of open up that secondary market and thusly kind of solve some of those problems that you just discussed.
That's a great point that you made about organic demand. I never thought about it in that respect. So how is the timeshare industry finally evolving to attract younger owners and travelers?
Yeah. So one of the key ways is the locations that they're targeting. I mean, again, I think people think of timeshare resorts and they think of places like, Orlando or the Poconos, when in reality, they're really starting to build in places like Charleston. They just announced a place in Atlanta. New York City has tons of timeshares in like Billionaires Row, right in the center of Midtown Manhattan. So destinationally speaking, they're definitely doing some evolution in terms of that thought process. The way in which the constructs are organized, initially it was all like deeded weeks. You own week 1 or 3 or whatever. Now it's mostly a point system, so you have a lot more flexibility. I think the flexibility needs to go a little bit further to really get the next generation of buyers, which is that although there are flexibility in usage, there still comes that time when a lot of these owners don't want to use it anymore. And that's where, companies like us and some other companies are really kind of leading that conversation, and that when you're done using it, you have other options available to you, like renting it. And I think that diffuses a lot of that tension that people have coming into the product.
And I want to get into KOALA in just a moment, but I have one more question for you. How did COVID-19 impact the timeshare industry?
The timeshare industry is surprisingly resilient. I started in the industry in 2008, and funnily enough, all these resorts and these vacation destinations were completely empty because no one was traveling, because no one had the cash, or they were afraid to travel and spend the cash. But yet the timeshare resorts were all packed because these people own them already. There's this kind of cyclical habit of travel, right? You're seeing a similar thing here, where the timeshare resorts were some of the first to rebound because people had these points that were just kind of building up, or these weeks that were building up, and they just wanted to go, go, go. And when you add to that, the products are really very naturally suited for what's happening now. So essentially you have the best parts of a vacation home. They have a lot of space, as well as all the cleaning protocols of your like hotel brands. So, I think again, it's seen some resiliency. We as a business had a lot of technology to develop during this process. So for us, it was a moment to really step back and figure out what our customer needs, customer being the timeshare owner, and how to solve that problem for them. Like you said, people that are not using their space, essentially.
And so tell us more about KOALA, because I would imagine you are in the sweet spot of this renaissance. Then also you have technology on your side.
Yeah, correct. So again, I think, we've spent the last year really perfecting the technology. It's a really complex landscape. So when you talk about like, oh, just build something like an Airbnb for an owner to upload. Well, these are timeshares are fungible goods where you essentially have millions and millions of owners that have access to millions and millions of different types of rooms, right? They don't actually own and live in the room and the property. So, and there's different brands and different rules and regulations. And then there's a resort that this guest has to check into. So there's a lot of technology behind the scenes that we're developing to make it super easy for an owner to actually upload a listing, and then for a traveler to actually book that listing and check into the correct room. So we spent that time doing that. We are now positioned, and we've seen a lot of growth over the last few months, particularly like, Q4 and Q1, we've seen a real ramp of growth. I think people are seeking a couple things. One, they're seeking value. Obviously, money is tight for a lot of people. People have been out of work. And two, certainty. This is something that our product does really, really well. Checking in, look, Airbnbs are great. There's a lot of options. You can go over the world. There's great value. But at the end of the day, you don't always know what you're going to get. And with a timeshare resort, you always know what you're going to get. And that's something we've really leaned into. The fact that you can have a 3-bedroom suite with a full kitchen, washer and dryer, but it's cleaned by Marriott, is something that you don't really get on these vacation rental sites. And that's definitely something we've seen a massive advantage with.
I also think it's great for families with little kids because it's exhausting going to breakfast, going to lunch, going to dinner. At least you can have, some cereal, some sandwiches, and make that easy, and then just have to go out to dinner. So I think, timeshares are great for that also.
Totally. And not only, it's a great point. And not only is it convenient, it's like, especially in the thick of things, it was actually safer. Like, people didn't want to check into hotels because, like, I got to leave 3 times a day to go eat. Like, I don't even feel safe doing that. So the idea that you can kind of have the best of both worlds with a timeshare, you get the comfort of having a hotel brand behind what you're doing, but also the space that your family needs to really take a nice vacation has been really essential to what we're doing, for sure.
Yeah, super interesting, Mike. Thanks for spending time with us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thanks for having me.